Clint Eastwood started his acting career as a day player, one of the collection of bit part actors that studios kept around to fill a variety of small parts in their productions. This would eventually land him a role as a cowboy on television, which in turn led to his casting as the man with no name in Sergio Leone's spaghetti western trilogy. Director Don Siegel would direct Eastwood in a few Hollywood westerns before giving him another iconic role as the brutal cop Dirty Harry. Eastwood's screen persona as a no-nonsense tough guy who spoke little but took action would cement him as a masculine archetype, similar to the one that John Wayne embodied in the generation before him. Eastwood was always willing to play the anti-hero, though, and this tendency actually angered the Duke. When Wayne was directed by Siegel in The Shootist, Wayne became enraged when asked to shoot a character in the back, and Siegel told him that Eastwood was willing to do it. Eastwood never desired for his characters to be role models, and with later works with Siegel, such as the strange Southern Gothic thriller The Beguiled, Eastwood began to strip away the persona he built in order to deconstruct it. If Eastwood embodied his society's ideas about masculinity, then what did they say about masculinity? That it was embodied by a bad-tempered, non-communicative loner who solved problems with violence? The film that could be argued to be Eastwood's first masterpiece as director, The Outlaw Josie Wales, cements this theme. Eastwood was set originally to only star, but after clashes with director Philip Kaufman, who also wrote the script, Eastwood took over as director. It's hard to imagine what Kaufman's original vision for the film was, since the results are so quintessentially Eastwood. The title character is a Civil War veteran who wants to escape his life of violence but finds it following him everywhere. One scene in particular stands out. A bounty hunter enters a saloon looking for Wales. Wales tells the man that he can walk out the door in order to avoid violence. This advice is at first heeded, but then seconds later he returns, saying that he had to come back. "I know," Wales replies before gunning him down. The scene seems to be the film's main theme and microcosm. Men would like to escape from the cycle of violence they are socialized with, but are forced to enact it because not to do so would be not to be real men. This makes toxic masculinity an inescapable cycle for the men in Eastwood's movie. While Eastwood's films would continue to contain problematic elements, like the rape scene in High Plains Drifter, he began to develop an idea of masculinity as a construct, one that socialized men into violence, and that they struggle to try to escape from. This would be one of the main themes of his work as director. Eastwood's early 90s western, Unforgiven, returns to this theme while savaging nearly every beloved trope of the classic Hollywood western. In this film, Eastwood plays William Money, a former outlaw who has retired to a quiet life raising a family. A classic western trope is used of a violent man who was allegedly tamed by his love for a woman. The trope goes back to the silent westerns of William S. Hart at least, but in this case we are left to speculate on this relationship, since Money's wife is long dead and is not even seen in flashback. With her gone, he has functioned as both father and mother for his children, but when he accepts a job hunting down some men who have brutalized a prostitute, his violent nature begins to return. Unforgiven is a complex work that contains numerous thematic concerns, but the way the film approaches the idea of gender is not the least of them. The prostitutes are thought of as property, so much so that compensating the brothel owner is considered sufficient restitution for permanently scarring one of them. They seek their revenge privately themselves. The only women we see at all in the film are the prostitutes, and we are alluded to Money's dead wife, who represents the other half of the Madonna-whore dichotomy within the story. The fact that Money has killed women in the past is considered disgusting, and the phrase, "he's killed women and children," is uttered throughout the film, showing the society considers the former little more capable than the latter. Money could just as easily be an older version of Eastwood's Josie Wales. He wants to escape the cycle of violence, but gets pulled back in only to discover it was part of him all along. The film reveals all the mythology about the West to be a lie. The lawman, Little Bill Daggett, played by Gene Hackman, is a charming sadist. A famous gunfighter turns out to be a fraud. There are no heroes here, and Money becomes the victim of the cycle of violence that he thought he had escaped before. The cycle of violence again is condensed to a single scene between Money and the Schofield Kid. The kid has bragged about killing men in the past, but it is revealed that he was actually lying, and his first kill is an initiation of sorts, where he could be set down the path of becoming like Money himself. "It is a hell of a thing killing a man," Money says. You take away everything he's got and everything he is ever going to have. Eastwood has continued to explore this theme of men socialized into violence even in films where he has not played the lead role. In A Perfect World, Eastwood tells the story of an escaped convict who takes a young boy hostage and serves as a surrogate father to him. This is one of Eastwood's finest films, with Kevin Costner portraying Butch Haynes, a man who was led down a path of violence by his own childhood, trying to serve as a role model to a young boy he hopes will not turn out like him. But the cycle is one that he perpetuates himself without even being aware of it. In Mystic River, we see a similar dynamic at play. Sean Penn plays Jimmy Markham, a man whose daughter is murdered. Eventually in the movie, he takes the law into his own hands, only to make a horrible mistake. When his guilt starts to get the better of him, his wife Annabeth attempts to deflect his guilt by appealing to masculine archetypes. She tells him he is the protector of his family and compares him to a king, another nod to the film's numerous references to Shakespearean tragedy. Some commentators labeled the scene as misogynist, completely missing the point. The scene is one of a kind that often plays out in Eastwood's films, where men and women reinforce each other's gender roles without even realizing it. We sometimes see the polar opposite type scenes in Eastwood's films, such as when Eastwood's Frankie Dunn attempts to enforce gender stereotypes on boxer Maggie in $1 Million Baby by telling her he doesn't train girls, but ultimately takes her on to discover she is one of the most dedicated boxers he has ever trained. Mystic River ends with another visual that shows one of Eastwood's favorite motifs. The boy is the father of the man. Jimmy Markham locks eyes with his childhood friend, Sean Devine, who suspects him of the crime he has committed. Sean makes a gun with his finger, and Jimmy throws up his hands. The scene is similar to children playing, but in this context it has a powerful portent. It is also worth noting that we see Sean's wife and child next to him, who he has been estranged from most of the movie. The film then cuts to the names of Jimmy, Sean, and their friend Dave Boyle, once written in cement, making the connection to their childhood selves and the fatalism of the story's tragedy that much more apparent. So while some critics tend to read Clint Eastwood's films and his portrayals of masculinity in a simplistic light, we see that there is much more complexity to his portrayal of masculine archetypes. My next video will be about 50 Shades of Grey and comparisons to Secretary, another film about BDSM.